Welcome to today's lesson. Today we will be beginning a new topic, and we will be looking at building plans. So the lesson objectives, upon completion of this unit, you all are expected to be able to read and interpret building plans. We would be looking at both vertical and horizontal plans, specifically horizontal, as well as plan layouts. And you would also be expected at the end of this lesson to understand the requirements for building plans. What is required in order for you to actually build and even implement these building plans. So a building or construction project requires a complete set of specialized drawings. Now, this complete set is what we would refer to as a project set. So we would look at what this project set consists of shortly. So these project sets are usually required by your local planning department and building control. What you would come to understand is these project sets, for example, would be required by Town and Country Planning Division, your local government departments, and other departments as well. As you all would have seen in your previous lesson, the number of different ministries and legislation, and also agencies that are usually involved in providing approvals for your the development of any building. The project set will be required by all of them. The same project set is what they would be all looking at, in addition to which all the contractors who would be engaged in actually developing your project, such as your builders, joiners, plumbers, etc. So the buildings, they are designed usually by an architect who works with a team of technicians and surveyors to help plan and produce these drawings that would be required by all those agencies and contractors. And the types of drawings that you would need, or in other words, the different types of drawings that would make up that project set, are location plans, site or block plans, and floor plans. We would look in the upcoming slides briefly at what some of these plans look like. So the drawings for new buildings also require approval from Town and Country Planning Division, as I've mentioned before you can begin any kind of construction work. The division, Town and Country Planning Division, they check that the quality of the design and the construction meets the required standards. So remember, Town and Country Planning Division is one of those agencies that has been established as a result of the Town and Country Planning Act. And Town and Country Planning Division is responsible for carrying out the requirements of that piece of legislation. So they will have a number of policies and guidelines in place, and they have the authority to enforce these types of requirements. Okay, so additionally, Town and Country Planning, they will make an assessment as to whether or not the style and proportions of the designed building that it is appropriate for the location. Because remember, Town and Country Planning would also be, for example, responsible for developing zoning policies. So they would make a determination as to whether, for example, if it is a residential, let's say it's a commercial building that you want to develop, is it the proposed location, proposed site, is it appropriate for that zoning area? Suppose, for example, they determine that it is inappropriate because you want to place a commercial building in a residential area. So decisions like that they will make. But to help avoid you submitting something that is inappropriate to Town and Country Planning for approvals, Town and Country Planning Division has made available to the public guidelines to developers and applicants for planning permission. So Those guidelines are very detailed, and it can help you actually develop plans for submission for approval that are at least within the requirements and the standards that Town and Country Planning Division will be looking for. So as mentioned in the previous slide, we have 3 types of plans that will be contained in your project set. We have location plans. Um, this is a type of area map with an enlarged location map, usually giving enough information to locate the project site in relation to nearby towns and highways. So you can see a fairly large geographic area within which your site is located, your proposed site is located, so you can see context, locational context. Then the next one would be your site or block plan. This site plan will contain several sheets of information, that is, which will show topography, topography being your landscape, various structures in the area, as well as features that need to be demolished. And it will also have information that shows the location of existing underground utilities, like, let's say, like your water pipelines, etc. This information would be necessary so that when you begin construction, you will know where these facilities are located, so that if you have to do things like excavation and construction, you would not damage people's pipelines and their resources, right? And of course, those various sheets of information you will have to get from the various departments, government departments. And then in your project set, you would also have your floor plan. This floor plan will show the location of the walls of your proposed building, and identify other components of the building like doors, windows, bathrooms, and other important elements that you deem are important to include on your floor plan for not only for approval but also for construction. So here is an example of what those plans may look like. Your location plan. Notice it covers a large geographic area. You can see roads. This is where your proposed sites is. You can see property boundaries of other buildings in the area, etc. Your site plan gives, notice it would zoom in a little more, so you're not seeing as much geographic area, but now you're getting more information. All right, this is the one where you would include information of your topography and other sources of information that you will collect from your different government departments that would be necessary for construction information. And then you have your floor plan, which is the building itself. So what I want you all to note here is, moving from location plan to floor plan, the scale changes. So you're moving from what we would call, in geography, we will call this a small scale. Small scale shows large geographic area but less detail. And then you're moving into a larger scale as we progress from location to site to floor plan. You're moving into a larger scale, which shows a smaller area but a whole lot more detail. All right, so those are some principles you have to remember. So we have our floor plan. Notice we have our walls, we have windows, we have doors. We will look at some of these symbols in some of the upcoming slides in some details. And this, you have dimensions written in labels here as well. This floor plan also includes symbols for furniture, so you understand how the rooms would be laid out, etc. Okay, so continuing, we're looking at sketches and working drawings now. So there is a difference between sketches and drawings. Sketches are freehand drawings of an object for a project done in order to get the idea down on paper, right? So in a sense, really think of a drawing as a sketch, sorry, as a first stage of a drawing. All right, that's where you're documenting and conceptualizing your idea. So sketches are not usually drawn to scale. All right, scale meaning mathematical proportional representations of the features. All right, um, though you can have neatly drawn sketches with fairly accurate dimensions, and those are usually sufficient for simple projects. Sketches of larger and more complicated sketches for larger and more complicated projects um, can serve as a basis for accurate working drawing. So in other words, as I said, it could be like the first stage. So you can have your freehand sketches, but then when you need to start moving towards preparing for submission for approval, you must have a properly scaled drawing. So your properly scaled drawing can be based on what you have in your sketches. All right. Now the working drawings are a complete set of complete drawings done in universal graphic language. In other words, there are standards and conventions that would be represented, such as the what we would look at in the list below here. All right. So you're using a standard graphic language so that the objects depicted can be constructed from the drawing alone without additional information. So it's standard so that whomever reads the drawing should be able to understand what they're looking at. So for example, what are some of these standards? Dimensions. So your working drawing should use lines scaled to the dimensions of the object. So the important thing to remember here are lines that are scaled. So you must have scales or scaling represented on your drawings. The working drawing must show specific views of an object with enough detail to enable the project to be constructed. Additionally, most working drawings will show three separate sides of an object from um, the flat. In other words, if you're standing outside a building, um, you want to see at least three sides of the buildings. All right, and head-on view. You also would want a vertical view as well. And additionally, pictorial drawings show three sides of an object in one view. All right. So in other words, the drawings must show a vertical view or plan view from overhead. And then you also want to have a horizontal view as though you are standing outside the building on all the sides of the building so that you can see what it looks like. Okay, let's talk a bit more about building plans. So the building plans, as you would see, actually look like maps. All right. As we mentioned, it provides important information such as dimension. So we're talking about scales here, where a scale would give you a measurement in order to determine the size of the object, size and shape, etc. Your plan should also indicate direction, just like a map. So your plan should also have a north arrow in it, so we know where our north direction is. If height information needs to be represented on your plans, that must also be indicated somewhere. So that would also be a scale as well, right? So you have horizontal scale and vertical scale. You also, because it's a map, as I mentioned before, you would have standard symbols and signs. We would look at some of those shortly, things like doors and windows, etc. It must be drawn to scale, as we mentioned, because it's a plan, it's not a sketch. Okay. And as mentioned in previous slide, you also want to give different views and sections. So you want that plan view from overhead, but then you also want that that vertical view. Okay, so drawing to scale. So scale drawing permits the size of the object to be reduced proportionally in order for it to be drawn on the size of the paper that you've chosen. Common scales of a drawing may be maybe 1 millimeter, 10 millimeters, 50, and so on. For example, 10 millimeters will represent 1 meter, or in other words, 1,000 millimeters on a map. So these numbers that they represented here are the number on the left. So what we're saying is, what this really means is 10 millimeters on your map represents 1 meter on the ground. So that's how it works, right? A scale rule is the most common type of scale used for drawing scale projects. So the scale rule is like your bar, that bar scale. Most of you should be familiar with those bar scales. All right. So that's typical of what might be used on a map, on one of these drawings, sorry. And its main divisions at the end of the scale, which are in centimeters or millimeters, usually represent 1 meter, just like we looked at right here in this point here. So some standard scale measurements. This is a ratio scale. All right, the one we looked at here is a type of ratio scale, but very precise measurements. This one here is just simply the ratio. So what the standard scale here, 1 to 100, for example, this would mean, for example, let's say 1 centimeter on the map actually represents 100 centimeters on the ground, and so on and so on, right? So sometimes you may have a different ratio scale, and for site plans, often it is 1 to 500. Okay. So let's look at some symbols now. So we will actually see a chart showing the visuals of what we're looking at here. So types of lines. We have border lines. So these are heavy solid lines drawn parallel to the edge of the paper. So those, it's as the word says, it's a border. So your plan should have a border, just like a map would have a border. Then we have object lines. This is a solid line that represents the visible edges or the form of an object. If that object is round, it's a solid round line. If it's square, rectangular, etc. Then we have hidden lines. This is a series of dashes that indicates the presence of a hidden edge. For example, imagine you're looking at a table from above, right? And you can see the edges of the outline of the table. But what if there is another structure along the length of that table in the middle, from underneath, that is part of the structure of the feature, but you cannot see it from above? So that hidden line is intended to give additional information, even though it's not immediately available or immediately visible, sorry. Then we have our dimension line. This is a solid line with arrowheads at both ends to indicate the length of a feature, the width of a feature. So this line doesn't actually define the object, but it indicates the dimensions of the feature. Then we also have break lines. So this is a solid jagged line that indicates that part of the object being drawn is not fully illustrated, or it has been left out. For example, this could be used in instances where maybe it's not possible for you you could not get all the information. So that jagged line, for example, would be an indication of some level of uncertainty about the shape or the size of the feature. A center line. This is a long, short, long. So we're talking about long dash, short dash, long dash line that's used to depict the center of a round object. An extension line is a solid line indicating the exact area specified by a dimension. So that's to indicate dimensions as well. All right, and then you have a leader line, which is a solid line with an arrow pointing from an explanatory note to a specific object. So in other words, it's like it's like a label line. So here we have some graphics about some of those lines that we were talking about. So we have our center line. This is typically how it would be drawn. Notice long, short, and this object here is defined by a center line. We have our visible lines that defines the objects. Here we have a circular object and a rectangular one. We have our hidden lines, right? Our dashed line here, and it's represented over here. Extension lines to represent dimensions. So this is with the arrows pointing from one end to the next, so we know. And usually there would be a label in here telling us what distance this is. Our dimension lines here again, very similar. Notice how this one is done, because this feature here on this side actually has two different lengths or distances, and both are represented using those arrows. And then we have our leader line. You see this leader line here pointing to the object, and there is a label associated with that. Then we have some other symbols that would be included in our building plan or floor plan. And all this information would be important for you all for your floor plan assignment. All right. So these here are typical doors, door type. We have a single door opening inward. So this would be like, for example, a front door, and it would open inward in this direction. So this is your door, and it's opening in this direction. The single open door, this time it opens outward. So this is just the opposite to this one. Single interior door opening in this direction. Now notice the difference between these, the interior door and the main doors to the house, such as the exterior door, is the size of the walls. So that's how you can depict the difference. All right. Then we have a double door swinging either way. That's what that means. This one is a refrigerator door opening in this direction. Our double doors opening inwards. So this is a door on this side and that, and it opens inward. In both doors open inward. This one is the opposite, opening double doors opening outwards. Interior door, similar thing, but the difference is the size of the walls itself. Interior doors opening in both directions. And then we have our sliding doors. I'm not too sure. I think these may be just two different examples of symbols for sliding doors. Now we have some typical windows. Right, so here we have a double hung, examples of double hung. The double hung are like those windows where you will have two parts, and in order to open them, you will lift it in order to open them. So that's an example of the double hung. Here we have double windows that open outwards, right? These are two examples. Then we have the pivoted or vented windows. This would be the kind of windows where it's different. It doesn't open out like that. It's it actually swings along the middle of the window. So you push out the bottom to open it, and then you pull it back into close. I'm not sure if you can't visualize what I'm talking about. If you go online and do a quick search, you'd be able to find pictures. All right. Then we have our single windows opening inwards. And then we have our right sash left over and left sash over right. Sorry. Those would be the windows where, again, it's a kind of sliding thing where you, in order to open, you slide one part over the other. So either left or right. And here we have some other conventional symbols. So if you recall, remember I said you would need to have a north arrow on your plan. I'm not going to go through all. I'm just going to point to some common ones. So like you have your staircase here. This is usually for larger buildings. where you will have two-way staircase separated by something. This is a typical straight staircase. This might be more common for a common symbol for the inside of a residential home, or if you have different levels of staircase as well. Let's see, what else would you have? You would have your toilet symbol and sinks. These here would be for larger buildings. Okay. These are examples of different types of walls. So for example, this is a room. Some rooms may actually be shaped like an L or a T. So you would have to make decisions as for your assignment as to what shape walls would represent your rooms. Okay, so this is, so here you would have, so bear in mind the outer walls will tend to be thicker than the inner interior walls. So these are your walls, this is a vertical wall, all right? And of course we looked at some examples of windows already. All right, so let's talk a bit about the building plan sections. So a section drawing shows a view of a structure as though it has been sliced in half or cut along an imaginary plane. So just imagine that you are standing outside a house and somebody rips down the walls, or well, yeah, somebody rips down the walls and you can see right through. All right. This can be useful as it gives a view through the spaces and surrounding structures, typically across a vertical plane, that can reveal the relationships between the different parts of the buildings that might not be apparent from a plan drawing. Plan drawing meaning from that aerial view from above. All right, so you're looking at a different view with the building sections. So this is what it might look like. So you have your plan view or floor plan. Now, please note here, if you have a two-story building or a two-story house, when you do a floor plan, you are expected to do a floor plan for each level. So for example, this is what the ground floor would look like, and this is what the upper floor might look like. Notice you see here for your outer dimensions of the building. Okay, now the vertical sections look like this. All right, now you see what we have here: elevations A, B, C, and D. These will be views from different sides of the building. This is, I guess, a picture of what the real building would look like. So we see some commonalities and features here. We see these two, I don't know what you call these, attic windows or something, the upper floor. All right, we know there's a door here, we can see it here. Window, we can see it here. So it appears that we are seeing this side of the building a little bit from the other side of this picture. D appears to be the back of the building. See, we can see this vertical structure here. We can see it in the picture as well. All right, so these sections are from different sides of the building. This here is our section. So this part of the building that we have seen it from, you can see where it appears that the walls have been ripped down, and we can see where there's a staircase here, some interior doors. This door here appears, this might be an interior door. All right, so this is an example of what this section looks like. So at this point, I want to thank you for joining me for today's lesson. I refer you to eClassroom now for details on this week's activity. Okay, thank you for joining me.